I am Barbara Palmer, volunteer with NAMI Valley of the Sun, and welcome, especially if you're a first-time visitor. We are providing these Thoughtful Thursday presentations in hopes that families who are looking for information can find it. We want to be there for you. It is my great pleasure to introduce Kristine Hansen. Kristine is a friend of NAMI Valley of the Sun. She has spoken to our families several times now. She always brings a room full to max of interested parties, families in need of information on how to navigate the process of qualifying for SMI. And so we are especially grateful to Kristine because she volunteers her time to inform us. And there is no other question that we receive more than where do we get started? And so for our loved ones who live with this illness and for our families, there's a world of help, support, education that we can receive through Crisis Response Network. So besides walking us through the process of how to navigate the system, she is going to also tell us about the other services available through Crisis Network. And I just am going to ask you, Kristine, if before you start your presentation, you can maybe share with us what's your connection with the world of mental health and helping families. We want to know everything about you, of course, but I'm going to let you volunteer what you got.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barbara, for that introduction. My name is Kristine Hansen. I work for Crisis Response Network. I oversee the SMI eligibility process for the SMI eligibility determination process for the state of Arizona. So it is my job to make sure that everybody who wants this, needs this, at least can be evaluated and have a determination made. My own personal, one of the reasons why I am so passionate about NAMI and the work that you guys do and why I want to be so supportive of your agency is, of course, I have a family history of mental illness that goes on both sides, all sides, everybody. Many years ago, I struggled with substance abuse myself, and I'm actually 13 years sober. So I sit here I strongly believe in recovery, and I believe in getting people the services that they need because it can save a life. It saved mine. So that's me. That's why I'm here. I'm going to go through the SMI determination and evaluation process with you guys. I'm going to try and keep my eye on the chat box. So if you guys have a question, type it in there. I'll see if I can get to it. If I don't answer it right away, it might just be that your answer to your question is going to be in a later slide. So by no means, I'm really not trying to ignore you. It just might make sense to talk about it in just a few moments. I only have 10 slides, and I do talk really fast, and it's really hard without all the facial cues to know when to slow down. So I'm going to trust that you guys are going to use that chat box. Let me know if I'm going too fast. Let me know if you need more information, okay? I already lost where the chat box is. I found it again. Okay, great. Let's go. So if you're not aware, serious mental illness, otherwise known as SMI, is the designation used in Arizona to identify adults who need additional support because mental illness severely impacts their ability to function. So that is that is how Arizona classifies SMI. That's what the definition is. And you'll see in this definition, it says used to identify adults. And I know I had a question already that somebody had emailed in already about at what age can this process start for an individual. And the SMI benefits package is for adults. However, at 17 and a half, that evaluation process can get started so that once that individual turns 18, they're already ready to transition into that SMI services. So next slide, please. So the clinical definition, that was just a broad, the classification that Arizona uses. Here's the clinical definition. So there must be a qualifying diagnosis and there must be functional criteria that's a direct result of that diagnosis. So a few examples of qualifying diagnoses are psychotic disorders, bipolar disorders, some major depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociative disorder, and a lot of the personality disorders as well are considered to be qualifying by the state of Arizona. The functional impairment piece is a little bit more broad, and it can just kind of depend on the individual, but in general, it looks like this. So there's either an inability to live independently, if there's a risk of harm to yourself or others, if there's a major dysfunction in role performance, or if there's a risk of deterioration. So if there's a risk of becoming functionally impaired, if there was a loss of services, for example, that kind of happens a lot when children are transitioning from children's services to adult services. A lot of times they need to make sure that they're applying for SMI during that period so that once they turn 18, they'll have that SMI case manager and that extra level of support. Okay, no questions in the chat box yet, so I'm taking that as I can go on. So one of the biggest questions, or I should say, one of the most frequent questions that I get when it comes to SMI services is why should I apply for SMI services? Or what's the benefit to my client? Or what's the benefit to my father? What is this and why do I need it? So covered services for folks who are determined SMI will have access to mental health services, even if they don't apply for access. However, those services will vary by individual and they'll vary by clinic, they'll vary by region. It really is all based on basically availability, except for case management and medication management. If an individual is determined SMI, they will get a case manager and they will get their medication paid for. Regardless of access coverage, private insurance, it doesn't matter. Any individual that's living in the state of Arizona is going to get case management and medication management. In addition to that, if an individual has access coverage or they have a benefits package that allows for these other things, there are therapy services, peer support, transportation, housing is a possibility, but again, based on availability. So not everybody with an SMI designation is going to qualify for every single one of these, benefits, but the medication management and case management are guaranteed. Okay. So just a little history, a little background on CRN, who we are, what we do, where we came from, why we are the ones that are designated to do this. So in 2014, CRN became the entity responsible for the SMI determination process in Maricopa County. And prior to 2014, the SMI determination process was overseen by the Reba. So the Regional Behavioral Health Authority was in charge of making determinations based on SMI eligibility. The Reba was also in charge of paying for those services. And it just seemed that there was a possible conflict of interest there, that maybe individuals were being determined or not determined SMI based on available funding, as opposed to based on whether or not they met the criteria. So DBHS at the time, the Department of Behavioral Health Services, made the decision to bring in a neutral third party, which is CRN. And sorry, I forgot I should be checking the chat box just in case I'm missing any questions. Nope, okay. I'll just blather on. So CRN is a neutral third party in the behavioral health system. We have no incentive to, that's like funding based or services based or anything. We don't provide any direct services. We simply review the evaluations to make sure that every individual that applies gets a timely determination and gets a determination that's based on their actual clinical criteria. So that's just an FYI. There's no incentive one way or the other. We do maintain a member-focused mission. Our goal is to make sure that we have all of the information that we can possibly get before making that decision. So we do probably about 700 of these a month. Again, we do them for the entire state, so that's not just Maricopa County, but it's all, you know, Tucson, Yuma, Flagstaff, Bullhead City, the whole thing. And we do about 700 of these a month. And we spend a lot of time on each one. We have a fairly large team. You know, it's a big lift for us, quite frankly. And we do it and we do it well. And the fact is what we're trying to do is do right by every single person that applies for SMI. So it is our role to review the evaluations received and make the determination of SMI eligibility based on that evaluation. So we complete all the SMI evaluations across the state, like I said. One thing to note, it is the mental health care providers who are completing the evaluation, and then they submit that to us. So again, that is what leads to that neutral third party in the behavioral health system. So we're not providing the services and we're not doing the evaluations either. We're simply reviewing the documents received to make sure that the criteria are there. If you or a loved one or a friend or a client, brother or sister, whoever would like to apply to be evaluated for SMI services, you absolutely can. Individuals can request an SMI evaluation by asking their current access provider, Treva, Reba, or you can, or if you don't already have one, you can just contact Access directly, and Access will make sure that a provider is able to evaluate you. Again, that is completely, it doesn't matter if you have Access services, it doesn't matter if you're Title 19, non-Title 19, if you have private insurance, what have you. Everybody living in the state of Arizona right now is eligible to have an SMI evaluation and determination completely free of charge. So this is a small disclaimer that I give. If you ever call a location, maybe a provider, and request an SMI evaluation, and they start talking about funding or billing you or anything like that, don't pay for that. It just means that maybe that provider isn't well educated in the SMI evaluation system, and maybe you could ask to speak with a supervisor at that agency, or you can just call Access directly and let them know that you're asked to be, that you've been asked to make a payment for that, and you shouldn't have to. Okay. So CRN has an office centrally located in Tempe, and we do have an office in Flagstaff and Tucson as well. Additionally, we have 21 community access locations that are accessible for remote locations, basically. So if for whatever reason you do need to see a psychologist at CRN and you are outside of those three, you know, kind of our major metropolitan areas, you could go to one of these many community access points, you know, in Show Low or Page or Littlefield or Kingman or Bullhead City or Holbrook, wherever you are, and you can access one of our community access points and be able to speak with somebody at CRN face-to-face using Zoom. No questions. All right. So in a nutshell, this is what the determination process looks like from start to finish. So again, anyone living in the state of Arizona can be assessed to see if they qualify for SMI eligibility, to request an evaluation. Stephen, I'm going to get to your question as soon as I wrap up, I promise. Thank you for asking. To request an evaluation, contact your general mental health provider or your Access health plan, or like I said, you can just call Access customer service directly if you don't have Access, and just request an SMI evaluation and they'll get you hooked up. After that evaluation has been completed, that assessor is going to submit your SMI determination packet directly to CRN, and CRN will make that decision in 3, 20, or 90 days. So ideally, we want to make all the decisions within 3 business days. However, sometimes additional information is necessary, and if you give us written consent to utilize 20 or 90 days additionally, we will, but only if you give us consent and only if we absolutely need to use that time. And then once that is complete, oh, these boxes are a little bit out of order, and that's my fault. I didn't notice that. I'm gonna put this box here, this purple box, back. It's like number 2. So anyone living in Arizona can be assessed to see if they qualify for SMI eligibility. And once the member requests to be assessed for SMI services, thank you, the provider agency has 7 days to submit that from CRN. So the process goes pretty quickly once you make that request, and once that evaluation has been completed, they're going to get you in within 7 days, or they should. If they don't, you should tell Access. They're going to get you in within 7 days, and then they're going to get that to us, and we're going to make that determination within 3 days, like I said, or 20 or 90, depending on if that's necessary and consented to. Stephen asked a great question about doing SMI screenings via telephone. If this was March 11th, I would say no. But we are in a post-COVID world. So currently, yes, a lot of the provider network are doing SMI evaluations via teleconference, or they're doing them via phone. Ideally, teleconference is preferred. However, sometimes technology is technology, and some people have access to some things that some people don't. So yes, currently, yeah, they can do them via phone. So once the determination process is completed, there is an appeal process if that determination wasn't made correctly the first time around. So it can be very possible that the determination was made incorrectly, either due to a lack of information, a lack of time, or it's just possible that most of the time when things are denied, it really does have to do with a lack of history or a lack of information that we have. So if that were to happen and you truly believe that you do meet SMI eligibility, or your friend or your loved one or your client, and you really want to advocate and say, hey, CRN, I think maybe you got it wrong. I'd really like you to take another look at this. We absolutely will, and it's through the appeal process that we can do that. So, sorry guys, just give me 1 sec. I can feel my voice starting to go. So every individual has a right to appeal their SMI decision. When appealing an SMI determination, the applicant has a right to an informal conference within 7 days of filing that appeal. So again, even on the appeal side, we are very, very aware of timeliness. We want to make sure that once somebody files for something or somebody's requesting us to take a second look or first look or anything, that we're doing that really quickly and making sure that people aren't, waiting for, this is a possible delay in services. So we want to make sure that we're taking that seriously and going very quickly when it comes to these things. So an informal conference is kind of a fancy name for a face-to-face meeting with a second reviewing psychologist. Oh, can you go back to that last slide for me? I'm still talking about it. Thank you. So an informal conference is just a face-to-face meeting with a second reviewing psychiatrist or psychologist at CRN. So basically we're giving it to another doctor who's got fresh eyes, who's going to review all the documentation that we already reviewed during the initial determination process. And we're going to review any new information that maybe we received with that appeal. In addition to that, we're going to meet with the individual face-to-face, you know, when we can, or via video conference or over the phone, and really talk about, you know, if they didn't qualify the first time around, why not? Was it a lack of clinical information? Was it a lack of, you know, historical information? Was it just, you know, a lack of a confusion about a diagnosis or something? And a lot of time, there is going to be enough information during that initial meeting that a lot of things will become more clear and eligibility can be approved. So I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend the appeal process. It doesn't hurt. It just gives us a chance to take another look and see if we need to make it right.
Kristine, there is a question from Dawn.
I see that. A family member did not qualify for SMI. We went through the appeal, the members are incarcerated. When can this individual be evaluated again? His attorney said he could be evaluated again prior to release. Thank you. Okay, great question. So you can have a determination made again in 6 months from the date of the original evaluation. So if they were evaluated, you know, back in October or November, they would technically be, yeah, just about eligible for a new, they can do a whole new evaluation and a whole new determination. So there's that. I hope that answers your question. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And she just updated her question. So Dawn just asked, can this individual be evaluated while incarcerated? That's a great question, and yes. So in Maricopa County, I'm assuming that this individual is in Maricopa County, Crisis Preparation and Recovery is the entity that's contracted to go into the jails and prisons and do these evaluations. So I will say, due to time constraints and, you know, security and all of that with the jails, sometimes that timeline, like the day that they request an evaluation, that process goes a little bit slower. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the evaluators to be able to get into the jails. They have to, you know, time that right. Sometimes it can take a couple of weeks after it's been requested to the time of the evaluation. So sometimes that can take a little bit of time. So by all means, if you're kind of, you know, on the cusp of that 6-month rule, just give a shout out to Crisis Preparation and Recovery and let them know that you would like to request this, and they can make sure that they can get into the jail as soon as they can. And Kristine just asked, what information is included in the evaluation? That's actually a really great question. Oh, the individuals in Yuma. Okay, that changes things. So it's actually Community Health Associates, Dawn, that you're gonna wanna call. And if you would like, you can email me directly and I can get you in touch with a contact at Community Health Associates, and they're the ones that are contracted to go into the prisons of Yuma. Thank you for clarifying that. So I'm going to go back to Kristine's question, and then I will get to Debbie's question as well. So what information is included in the evaluation? So the evaluation is going to be a, you know what, let me, just give me 1/2 of a second. I'm just going to pull up a copy of one so I can give you kind of a broad strokes. Okay, so in the assessment, there is a section for, there's a demographic form. So name, phone number, date of birth, emergency contact, all of that sort of information so that we have that. There's a medical history, there's mental health history, medication, so a list of kind of current medications or past medications, and then a whole box for mental health symptoms. So this is the chance for the individual to describe in their own words their mental health symptoms, difficulties of symptoms, how long they've been going on, that, requesting what kind of assistance they need because of the symptoms. There's also a section for a risk assessment. So that is gauging, what level of risk are you at? Or is there history of, violent outbursts, suicide attempts, current suicidal ideation, all risky behavior items. There's a section for legal history or substance abuse history, education, employment, interpersonal functioning, general functioning, and then there's what's called a mental health status exam. So that's kind of in a nutshell everything that's sort of being, asked of the client. Okay, so Debbie asked, you know what, Debbie asked me this question privately, so I'm going to hold off on answering that. Debbie, I will respond to you privately. If you meant to send that to everyone, feel free to resend that to everyone, but because it's marked private, I'm going to keep it that way for right now. But Stephen has said, I asked my sister to voluntary screen for SMI. She said that she did, but she was told the benefits weren't worth it, and they haven't been able to send me information, which she said she gave them permission to send me. So the question is, how can I determine if she actually conducted the SMI screening? If she didn't, I will have to request the involuntary screening through the courts. So Stephen, I feel for you, I really do. It sounds like your sister's really going through it right now. Unfortunately, without her signing an ROI, I don't think that Teros will be able to share that information with you. And if you are that concerned about, her safety or the safety of others, I would maybe recommend an involuntary screening through the court system. If you need help doing that or who to get in contact with to do that, so Connections AZ, formerly UPC, if you give them a call, they will walk you through it step by step. So I hope that Teros didn't tell her that, that the SMI services aren't worth it, because it sounds like maybe she could really benefit from a higher level of care if you're thinking about doing an involuntary. So, okay, so Debbie did put her question to everyone, great. Son is a private paid psychiatrist and therapist, but he's also on Access. Would he need to stop seeing them and receive services through an Access provider? Also, what documents does he need to apply for the evaluation? So that's a great question. Some folks who are on private pay, it can be a little bit tricky if they're determined SMI, because if an individual is determined SMI, it will enroll them with the Regional Behavioral Health Authority insurance package. So if they're here in Maricopa County, that's going to be Mercy Care. If they're in Southern Arizona, that's going to be Arizona Complete Care. So Arizona Complete Health, yes, healthcare. So just be careful with that. I hesitate to give anybody any advice about insurance coverage, that's really not my strength and not really where my knowledge lies. So I would definitely recommend talking to your psychiatrist that you're already seeing and making sure that they also accept, Mercy Care or Arizona Complete. A lot of folks do. So that way that they can still be covered. So they can still see that psychiatrist. As far as documents that he needs to apply, the onus is not on the individual to have any sort of documentation when it comes to the SMI evaluation. That is completely on the provider to make sure that all of the required documents are submitted so that an SMI evaluation can be completed and a determination can be made. That being said, if you know that there's a history of mental health treatment, for example, with this psychiatrist, you're just going to want to make sure that whoever is doing that evaluation, that they're filling out a release of information for this psychiatrist so that we, CRN, can request those records and make sure that we have all of the information that we possibly can. So it's not on you to make sure that we have those records. I would just, as the advocate for your son, make sure that he's filling out an ROI for that psychiatrist so that we can get that clinical documentation. Good questions. Okay, so Stephen, thank you for sharing this and asking this question because it's really important for folks to know this. So Stephen just asked the group let us know his sister is concerned that the SMI designation will prevent her from getting her child back with her child custody. It is protected health information at the end of the day. An SMI designation is not anything that is printed anywhere. It doesn't get put on your access card. It doesn't get registered with the state of Arizona, like the driver's license company. Like nobody knows about this except for a behavioral health provider, the Reba, and the individual. If she signs an ROI for the court to have, full access to all of her information, that's another thing, but it's not necessary for her to do. And quite frankly, I probably wouldn't disclose that because an SMI designation does not mean that an individual is not able to care for a child. So to me, it's neither here nor there as far as, custody. She absolutely does not need to disclose that. So I would just let her know that it's protected health information. So it's PHI, it's HIPAA protected. There's no need to worry about that. And then Christine just asked, I thought SMI was voluntary. Do you need a court-ordered treatment, COT, for involuntary SMI? Yes. So an SMI evaluation is 100% voluntary unless somebody has been placed on COT or they're in what's called a COE, court-ordered evaluation period. So there is a 72-hour COE period if somebody is petitioned and admitted to a hospital involuntarily. An evaluation can be completed during that 72 hours before they're placed on court-ordered treatment officially to make sure that all of those services are there once the individual is placed on COT. But outside of that process, it is absolutely voluntary and they do need to sign a consent form letting us know that they do agree and would like to be determined SMI. Let me just make sure I got all these questions. Okay, so very last slide here. What time is it? Okay, perfect. Very last slide here. A common question I get as well is, how long will an SMI determination last? So generally, the SMI determination is going to last indefinitely unless the individual requests that it's removed. If an individual requests that they would like their SMI designation removed for whatever reason, that is a process that's called decertification. And decertification is the term used for a person who was deemed eligible SMI and they are no longer SMI. So a clinical decertification is a person is asked to have a psychologist review whether or not they still meet the SMI criteria. An administrative decertification is a person who has not used their SMI services in over 2 years. They may request to automatically be decertified by Access. And that's a process that happens directly through Access. It happens outside of CRN. The clinical decertification is pretty similar to the SMI eligibility process. But instead of supporting SMI criteria, the records would not support SMI criteria anymore. And that's it for my slides. So here's our phone number. Here's our website. Okay, questions? So Tracy has asked, can you clarify the role between CRN and the Reba in the determination process? I've been told by a behavioral health provider that they have a SMI designated staff person. Does that mean they work with CRN? Also, what about crisis preparedness and response? What is their role? Okay, so CRN, so the Eligibility Care Services Department, what we do is we just review the evaluations and make the determination. So my best guess is, so we work outside of the Rebas. We work, kind of tentatively with the Rebas in that we share information with them. Once a determination is made, the Reba needs that information, obviously, so that they can provide services. But we are not contracted directly with them. None of our funding comes from them and vice versa. So it all is, like I said, we're a neutral third party. So this provider who said they have a designated SMI individual on staff, my guess is that's the person who does the SMI evaluations for that location. They're probably the subject matter expert. They know how to do the paperwork. They're great at gathering the documentation and submitting it on time. So they're that subject matter expert likely for that determination. I don't know that I'm familiar with crisis preparedness. Oh, crisis response, or I'm sorry, crisis preparation and recovery. Is that who you're asking about? Their role? Their role is they are the provider in Maricopa County who is contracted to do evaluations for folks that don't have a current access plan. So if an individual is admitted to the hospital or they are incarcerated or they just don't have access coverage, all of those individuals are able to have an evaluation completed, and Crisis Preparation and Recovery, CPR, is the agency that is going to do that evaluation for them. So as opposed to dispatching, random case managers from Teros who all have their own, caseloads and everything, Crisis Preparation and Recovery, their whole job is to be dispatched out and do evaluations, like I said, in the hospital. They do the COE evaluations at Valleywise. Sorry, my dog's up to no good. Hey! He can't be trusted. You can't trust these guys. So they're going to go into the hospitals if somebody's at Valleywise, Desert Vista, wherever they are. Crisis Preparation and Recovery is they're the evaluators that are going to go out and do those evals. I hope that answered your questions.
Yeah, so they do the eval, but CRN still does the determination.
Correct. Yeah, they do the eval, they submit it to us, and then we do the determination. Yeah.
So no other agency, strictly with access on this, it would just go through CRN.
Correct.
Arizona.
Yep.
There's a lot of misinformation out there.
I know, that's why I like to do this. It's true, there is. Okay, did I miss any questions? You haven't think of anything else? This is the only time we've gone under time.
Well, thank you so much, Kristine. That was fabulous. I've learned a lot, and that really got my brain thinking into new things. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.
Yes, incredibly informative, Kristine. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to have to watch it a couple more times. A lot of information, but I'm glad it's recorded, and thank you. Yes, it was very, very helpful.